One of the biggest reveals from Security Breach was that the FNAF 6 pizzeria was underneath the Pizzaplex. Ruin carried that plot point forward by showing more of that underground labyrinth, including a cave with falling red water and a scooping room. As the games moved on to Secret of the Mimic, we got the revelation through the Parachute.exe ending that underneath Murray's Costume Manor was an underground model pizzeria that would become the FNAF 1 building, the R&D Freddy's, including various prototype animatronics of the original band, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, and newcomers Bub and Monty. This basement level was connected to a larger underground tunnel system of various levels and rooms between the MCM factory and Murray's house, all on land that was bought out by William Afton and Fazbear Entertainment. With these subsequent reveals of massive underground structures, people have started to put together that all of these possibly are one and the same. But how? How are these places seemingly built on top of one another laid out? What is the timeline of all these different underground tunnels and buildings? Who owned what? When were they built? How are they still around in modern day? Let's discuss. To start, we must go back to the beginning, to the earliest part of the timeline. Murray's Costume Manor is the bedrock of all of this, of even Fazbear Entertainment itself if we want to be generous. We see how William and Henry took advantage of Edwin, his company, and his employees throughout Secret of the Mimic. Employees leave to start their own businesses, sell secrets to Fazbear, and even the lucrative deal that would have saved MCM is fraught with issues, mostly relating to the designs of the animatronics. The way out, seemingly, was selling the land that MCM and Murray's house were built upon to Fazbear and William. One of the endings of the game, and in my opinion the canon one, has Arnold travel to the basement of the Costume Manor and solve puzzles throughout the R&D Freddy's, the lucrative deal that bankrupted Edwin. And eventually, traveling through the underground tunnel system to Edwin's father's house. After fighting off the Mimic and getting Cradle.exe to run, the whole place starts to fall apart and burn down. Both the house and Costume Manor are left burning as Arnold leaves and is then attacked by the Mimic. What happens next is a bit of a mystery, but we can have a few guesses at least about what happens to the land. Since it was bought by William and Fazbear Entertainment, the likelihood of them reusing that land is high. Murray's house is eerily similar to the FNAF 4 house, especially in the secret ending of the game, with David's room being far too familiar to the FNAF 4 bedroom. We also know William Afton will build an underground bunker for circus babies that will also house his experiment rooms that we see in FNAF 4 and are brought up in the story Dittophobia. A bunker seemingly connected to his house, or at least some Fazbear property, that again has the FNAF 4 bedroom filled with imagery similar to David's bedroom here. Looking at the VR games, specifically the Help Wanted DLC Curse of Dreadbear, we see the Afton house from FNAF 4 off in the distance on a hill, with a red lake where Dreadbear rises out from close to the player. The map for Murray's Costume Manor also has a lake nearby the property and a house on a hill. This lake is important, and we'll get back to it later, but I wanted to mention it here as another connection for Afton's house and Murray's land. I've discussed in greater detail what I think could have happened with the land and its connections to the Afton house, and the Fredbears of FNAF 4 in this video here, but I'll quickly discuss it again. I'm operating under the assumption that the Fredbears we see in FNAF 4 is a second location. We know a Fredbear's location has to exist during the time of Secret of the Mimic due to, well, loads of evidence, but if Murray's house becomes the Afton house, and thus the bunker becomes sister location, the Fredbears we see in FNAF 4 must be built after Murray's burns down, when Fazbear can swoop in and take the land without issue. When Afton rolls in and builds his house on this open plot of land, he also expands the business and creates his own Fredbear's establishment near where MCM would have stood. This could also explain what happens to the suits in R&D. They were taken and used for Afton's location. That is, if they weren't scrapped completely, knowing Henry and William didn't want to use them for the restaurant project.
Are they insane? The look of these new animatronics is Fiona's design, and they're great. Oh, first they approve the art, then they approve the proofs. Now they change their minds when we're so close to final. I got the change order from Hen last night. None of this makes sense. I'm almost done. Why change it now? It would be so much easier to keep using the spring locks. Just hire some teens to wear the suits like we always do.
Of course, Crying Child gets his head caved in by Fredbear and dies, resulting in Afton's Fredbear's closing. Maybe all Fredbear locations were forced to close because of that. Or another reason. Charlotte died at some location, likely far away from the Afton's house as Midnight Motorist suggests, meaning it is not the FNAF 4 Fredbear she is killed outside of, as that was likely already closed and is also near the Afton house, so it must be the first Fredbear's location, the one in operation since Secret of the Mimic, or perhaps even a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The FNAF 2 movie has Charlotte killed at the first Freddy's in that universe, and while these are different continuities, I feel we must take that information into account. Her death is marked as 1982 in the movies, prior to Crying Child's, but with how timey-wimey her death is in all continuities, it's hard to use that as strong evidence one way or the other. There is the possibility of the Fredbears of FNAF 4 being fake, however, and I mentioned it in my previous video, but I wanted to dive a little deeper here to try and reconcile with it. From what we see in Sister Location and read about in Dittophobia, the likelihood of this part of the map being fake is just too high, but the possibility of two Fredbear's locations just works too well in my opinion. I do think both could be possible. There was a Fredbear's near Afton's house in FNAF 4, but it closed due to Crying Child's death, becoming Junior's as we see in Midnight Motorist. We also know Afton's house from FNAF 4 is near a lake due to Curse of Dreadbear, sitting on top of a hill over it just like Murray's house in Secret of the Mimic. From Dittophobia, we get a description of the bunker layout, and while Rory's fake room and house is a sort of combination of the FNAF 4 bedroom and the minigame house, he leaves to a room not too dissimilar to the private room in Sister Location, and then ends up in Circus Gallery, going a way that only makes sense if he came from the FNAF 4 minigame observation room, as listed in Sister Location. Rory continued on down the hall. This hall, like the one on the other side of his bedroom, had the same metal tracks set into the wooden floor. The other set ran on to the end of the hall. Another set of tracks ran from the closet to the bed, and another set ran from the other side of the bed to the doorway leading to the left side hall. Examining the door, Rory decided that this one was real. It had hinges and cracks around the edges of its dirty, white-painted surface. Rory grasped the door's knob and turned it. Looking back at him from the shadows of a small, dusty enclosure, the decrepit purple-blue bunny that was a major player in Rory's ongoing nightmares gazed, dark-eyed and still, straight ahead. He slammed the door in the phony creature's face, and he turned to stride back into his room. There, Rory marched to his closet. He investigated the back of it, and quickly found the fox version of the creatures that terrorized him at night. Rory stomped out of the closet and went to his bed. Dropping to his knees, he found a flap in the carpet. Under the carpet was a trapdoor. Beneath the trapdoor, he saw the horrific bear that always blocked his escape from the creatures. It, too, was nothing more than an oversized puppet. His head starting to pound, Rory left his room via the door on the right and followed that hallway's tracks to the door at the end of the hall. There, he found the disintegrating chick and its cupcake. It was all fake, every bit of it. He returned to the kitchen, unable to let go of a hunch he had about the refrigerator. It wasn't actually a fridge. There was no back to the appliance. Instead, the fridge's interior was a tunnel-like enclosure that extended back behind the fridge, reaching through the kitchen's wall. The metal tunnel led to a metal door. Although the door had no handle, Rory could easily see its edges. Rory hunched over and crawled into the long, narrow enclosure. The flimsy metal gave a little under his palms. Rory lunged forward and shoved the metal, and the door popped loose with a clatter. Nothing but blackness looked back at him. He crawled back into the fridge and shone his light through the opening. Rory was in a concrete corridor. In the faint glow of his flashlight, it was hard to see the details of what was around him. The corridor, however, appeared to be lined with metal racks. The racks were filled with, of all things, something that looked like scuba tanks. Rory stepped over to one. He aimed his light at someone writing on it. Danger, compressed gas. Rory scrunched up his face and walked down the corridor, his flashlight's rays zipping this way and that. The tangle of black hoses that wormed all over the walls reminded Rory of snakes. This attention to the hoses was what led him to an old gray machine at the end of the corridor. No sound came from the machine. Rory went past it. A few feet beyond the machine, just before an open doorway, Rory came to a small gray metal desk. Rory pointed his light through a narrow doorway just beyond the metal desk. That was his only option now, so he stepped through it and found himself in another corridor. Although this one wasn't lined with gas tanks or rubber hoses, it still had snakes running all over the walls. These snakes were made of metal, and they looked like electrical lines or maybe water pipes. This corridor was dirtier than the last one. The corridor's pale gray walls were covered with streaks of grease, and the lines and pipes had woolly layers of dust. When the corridor that Rory was in connected up with another one that led both left and right, Rory shrugged and went right. The rooms were disturbing. One was obviously some kind of observation station. It had slanted glass walls that looked out at the darkness Rory couldn't see into. Above one of the glass walls, there was a panel of unlit colored lights. Even though the lights weren't on, Rory could see that the 4 lights were different. 1 blue, 1 green, 1 pink, and 1 yellow. On an adjacent glass wall, a poster of a wild-looking girl with red pigtails had the word "Celebrate" printed across the top. What was beyond the glass walls? He flickered his flashlight beam toward the poster again. The pigtail girl's wide-mouthed grin was much too toothy to be friendly. I wouldn't be surprised if this area of the bunker was possibly created from R&D Freddy's, considering there was almost a whole restaurant already down there, as well as a whole Fredbear and Spring Bonnie animatronics. Does this discount FNAF 4's minigame as fake? I don't think so. FNAF 4 is such a weird game with its gameplay and what it's trying to represent. I think we can assume some sort of event similar to what we played did in fact happen, but perhaps the iteration we are seeing in FNAF 4 is part of Afton's experiments on other kids to replicate what had occurred. We know Sister Location's whole purpose was to kidnap kids for some experimentation, whether that be for fear, Remnant, or whatever else Afton was trying to do. Crying Child did die at Fredbear's, near his home he could walk to, a Fredbear's that closes and becomes the Bar Juniors in Midnight Motorist, forcing William to have to drive far to get to work, and subsequently drive home fast after killing Charlotte outside of a restaurant location. Skipping toward the end of the Scott Games era, Pizza Simulator is what brought a lot of the loose ends during Scott's games together. We know a small building owned by Fazbear Entertainment must be used for Henry's Fire, and what better place than the abandoned Fredbear's location? This isn't a new idea, but with the information given to us in Security Breach, Ruin, and now Secret of the Mimic, I think we can definitively say that the FFPS building is, or was, Junior's, and before that, Afton's Fredbear's from FNAF 4. While the back alley screenshots could imply a connection to Charlie's death minigames, from everything else I've talked about, I don't think she died at the same location that would become the Pizzeria Simulator building, nor where Crying Child died. From a character motivation perspective, from what we see in FNAF 4, whether those minigames are entirely real or not, Charlie must die at a location separate from FNAF 4's Fredbear's. Whether that is the original Fredbear's or a Freddy Fazbear's, it's honestly up to you. Another nail in the coffin is we also see in Ruin a scooper room that is connected to the FNAF 6 building through various tunnels and caves, and what location has the scooper? The Circus Baby Entertainment and Rentals bunker, a bunker that is connected to the FNAF 4 building, and likely Afton's house. Pizza Sim and Sister Location are over the same plot of land, the same land that was used as Fredbear's of FNAF 4, Junior's Bar, Murray's Costume Manor and his house, and what would eventually become the Mega Pizzaplex. After the Pizza Sim fire, whatever was left of that building was left to rot. While Fazbear Entertainment reorganized itself, it created the VR game and animatronic delivery service we see in Help Wanted and Special Delivery. From this, they were able to rebuild and come back bigger than ever with the Mega Pizzaplex. And what place would they build it on than the only plot of land they likely had, but the Pizza Simulator's burnt remains. We even see the same truck used from Curse of Dreadbear in the teaser hub for the Pizzaplex. Reused asset, or showing that these are the same plots of land? Regardless, by the time of Security Breach released, we had our answer. Going under the growing sinkhole in Roxy Raceway, we find ourselves to the sunken and burned Pizza Simulator building, and underneath that, the burn trap room in the labyrinth of Pizza Sim. Regardless of how true the burn trap ending is, the fact of the matter is the Pizza Sim building being underneath the Pizzaplex is still true through Ruin and Help Wanted 2. When we go down there in Ruin, we go a different way, through a cave system where water from above is running down into a red lake. Somewhere above the sinkhole is a source of red water coming into this cave. Where would a source of red water be seeping and draining into the sinkhole? Well, the lake from Curse of Dreadbear and Secret of the Mimic, of course. Continuing on from that, we get to Candy Cadet's area, where in early designs for this location was intended to be a carnival teaser. What this means we still don't know exactly, but I can think of a few answers. Either this is a tease for the game after Secret of the Mimic we know Steel Wool was working on, or more than likely it was a tease for Secret of the Mimic. In the Mimic's lair, we see costumes that will eventually be found in Murray's Costume Manor, and I wouldn't be surprised if something similar was intended to go here. Continuing toward the Mimic's room, in the final game it is lower than the Burn Trap room, implying it to be deeper underground than the Pizza's building and Labyrinth. What would be down here? Well, the MCM tunnels that would become sister location, of course. And I think another smoking gun to that line of thinking is what the Mimic's room was originally going to be. In early tests, it was a small restaurant-like building, with the help-wanted models of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica there, with a little curtain, possibly for Pirate's Cove, or for the Mimic to peek out of. So what could this mean? Since it's in early concepts, we can't know for sure. Perhaps this was to tie Glitch Trap or Burn Trap and the Mimic closer together with a recreation of the Pizza Party ending from Help Wanted. Maybe this was meant to be R&D Freddy's, a hint to what we would later find in Secret of the Mimic with early incarnations of the Fazbear Band. It's hard to say, but the fact that this was intended to be the Mimic's room does raise some eyebrows. If it was always meant to be this deep underground, it being what was left of MCM's R&D Freddy's does make some sense. Regardless, in the final game, none of this appears, but for some MCM costumes, which this deep underground would make sense for it to appear if this was a part of the MCM tunnel system. After Cassie runs from the Mimic, we find our way to an old elevator, similar to the ones from Secret of the Mimic, and that's where the game ends normally and likely canonically. However, if you are able to open the doors throughout the game from the control panels scattered throughout the Pizzaplex, it leads Cassie to a scooping room. I've brought this up recently, but this is the real linchpin in placing all these locations together. Why would Fazbear create another scooping room so similar to the one seen in Sister Location in a cave system underneath a sinkhole they are trying to fix and cover up? They aren't. It's a leftover from Sister Location, again showing how the Pizza Sim building was built over top of Afton's bunker that itself was connected to FNAF 4, or at the very least to his house. For the modern story, however, I think the scooper is important in whatever goal Glitch Trap and Vanny were doing prior to Security Breach. That now with Glitch Trap's seeming demise in Help Wanted 2 might be a foiled plan. Likely it was being used to power the Pizzaplex, and I've gone over what connections it, the Glamrocks, and Funtimes have in this video here. Now, since we have gone over everything that is likely to be in the bowels under the Pizzaplex, let's see how it all connects. The very beginning, the foundation of it all, Murray's Costume Manor and Edwin's house. These were built however long ago by Edwin's father. As the business expanded, the building grew, and eventually Edwin's tunnel system was built underneath, connecting the two. As Fazbear Entertainment grew and the restaurant deal put MCM in financial instability, William and Fazbear bought the land Murray's is built on. Come the time of Secret of the Mimic and the destruction of the now-defunct Costume Manor, Fazbear and William were able to take over the land with no issue, salvaging whatever they could find and expanding their business with the new Fredbear's establishment, and William building his new house on the foundation of Murray's. Below ground, however, William sees the opportunity a secret underground bunker could be to him. After the accident that leaves Crying Child dead, William's Fredbear's closes and the building is left to be sold, eventually becoming the Bar Juniors. The tunnels, however, remain unchanged, and William is able to continue with whatever he wants down there. As William falls deeper into madness and his psychotic murderous tendencies, he sets up Circus Baby's Pizza and eventual rental service to bring kids down to his bunker for experimentation. He sets up observation rooms to induce fear toxins and run experiments, discovering the power of Remnant in the process. All this while above ground, Freddy's trundles on with failing location after failing location. Eventually, Junior's closes and that building is left once again, until decades later Henry needs a place to finally put everything to rest. Considering Henry found blueprints for the scooper, I wouldn't be surprised if he knew about or found the Sister Location bunker, and as part of his final fire, was trying to also destroy those as well. And he was partly successful. From the duffel bag messages in Security Breach, it seems the sinkhole was something already there that Fazbear Entertainment decided to just build over. The sinkhole likely opened up because of the more cavernous areas, the already disturbed ground from the tunnel systems, and the large amounts of flowing water near the site, likely coming from the giant lake nearby. What was the original surface was likely covered up and built over, and everything below was likely crushed closer together from the sinkhole event, allowing for easier access between the various underground creations of the Pizza Sim Labyrinth, the cave systems, and the Circus Baby and old MCM tunnels. Fazbear Entertainment just built over what they could, burying it all in an attempt to cover up the past and forget about it. But the past has a way of crawling its way back to you. But that right there is the Fazbear Sinkhole layout explained and mapped out. I hope you all enjoyed it, as this video was probably the biggest and most in-depth I've done, covering almost every era from the FNAF franchise to piece together how and why the sinkhole was created. It's a mystery people have been trying to put together and understand for a while now, and I think I've done a pretty good job of covering how I think it all went down. This is a pretty confusing topic to wrap your head around about it and how it all connects, and I want to hear what you guys think. So if you have any thoughts about it or stuff that I've overlooked, please sound off in the comments below. I'll see you all next time.